The sun beat down on the desert highway like a hammer on an anvil, heat shimmering off the asphalt in waves that made the horizon dance. The road stretched empty for miles, cutting through scrubland and dust, flanked by nothing but sage and silence. Then came the sound, a low rumble that built like distant thunder, growing louder until it shook the air itself. Motorcycles, not just one or two, but a pack, their engines roaring in harmony, chrome flashing in the brutal light. The Hells Angels rode in formation, leather vests bearing patches earned through years and blood, faces weathered by wind and road. At their head rode Cobra, the chapter president, his beard streaked with grey, his eyes hidden behind dark glasses. Beside him, Tank, broad as a truck, his arms sleeved in ink. Behind them, a dozen more, brothers bound by code and chrome. They had been riding since dawn, heading to a rally 3 states over, when Cobra's bike began to falter. The engine coughed, sputtered, then died with a final wheeze. He coasted to the shoulder, boots dragging gravel, cursing under his breath. The others circled back, engines idling, concern etched in their faces. Tank killed his engine and swung off, boots hitting the ground with weight. What happened? Cobra kicked the stand down, his jaw tight. Dead. Just died on me. They gathered around the bike, a custom Harley Davidson that Cobra had built himself, every piece chosen, every bolt tightened by his own hands. It was more than a machine. It was pride, history, freedom forged in steel. Now it sat silent, lifeless, mocking him. One of the younger members' Reaper knelt beside it, listening, touching. He shook his head. Engines seized. Could be the cylinders, could be the pistons. Hard to say without tearing it down. Cobra's hands curled into fists. They were 100 miles from the nearest city, stranded under a sun that showed no mercy. The rally was in 2 days, and without his bike, he would not make it. Worse, the Brotherhood would be incomplete, and that sat heavier than any heat. Tank squinted down the road, shielding his eyes. There's a town up ahead, maybe 10 miles. We passed a sign. Cobra nodded, though his expression remained dark. We tow it!
Find a shop.
Get it fixed. They rigged a tow with rope and patience, lashing Cobra's bike to Tank's, and the convoy started forward again, slower now, the sound of engines muted by frustration. The road stretched on, the town appearing first as a shimmer, then as a line of low buildings huddled against the desert. A gas station, a diner, a handful of houses with peeling paint and dust-coated windows. And at the far end, half hidden behind a chain-link fence, a garage. The sign above it was faded, letters barely readable. Raylan's Auto and Cycle Repair. The lot was empty except for a rusted pickup truck and a couple of motorcycles in various states of disrepair. The building itself looked worn. Corrugated metal walls streaked with rust, windows grimy with years of desert grit. But the bay doors were open, and from within came the sound of tools clanging, the hiss of an air compressor. The pack pulled in, engines rumbling, dust rising in clouds around their wheels. They dismounted, stretching stiff legs, eyes scanning the place with skepticism. This was not the kind of shop they were used to. No shiny showroom, no rows of new parts gleaming under fluorescent lights. This was a place held together by grit and stubbornness. Cobra walked toward the open bay, his boots echoing on the cracked concrete. Inside, the air was cooler, thick with the smell of oil and metal. Workbenches lined the walls, cluttered with tools, parts, half-empty cans of grease. A radio played low, some old country song about lost highways. And beneath a Harley Sportster, legs extending from under the frame, was a figure in grease-stained coveralls. "Hey!" Cobra called out, his voice carrying authority even in a stranger's space. "You the mechanic?" The legs shifted. A wrench clanged against concrete. Then she rolled out on a creeper, and the angels froze. It was a woman. Young, maybe late 20s, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, face smudged with grease, green eyes sharp and assessing. She stood, wiping her hands on a rag, and looked them over without flinching. She was small, lean, arms corded with muscle earned through work, not gyms. Her coveralls hung loose, but could not hide the competence in her stance. The way she held the wrench like it was an extension of her hand. "I'm the mechanic," she said, her voice steady, unbothered by the pack of leather and ink staring her down. "What do you need?" Silence hung in the bay. The angels exchanged glances, some smirking, others frowning. Tank crossed his arms, his expression doubtful. Reaper snorted, shaking his head. Cobra stepped forward, removing his sunglasses. His eyes were hard, measuring. "My bike's dead. Needs fixing, fast," she nodded, glancing past him to where the others were wheeling his Harley into the bay. Her eyes lingered on it, taking in the custom work, the chrome, the wear. "What happened?" "Engine seized," Cobra said flatly. "Middle of nowhere. We're heading to a rally. Need it running by tomorrow night." She walked over, crouching beside the bike, running her fingers along the engine casing. Her touch was careful, practiced, like a doctor examining a patient. She listened, tilted her head, then straightened. "I'll need to tear it down. Could be a few things. Might be an all-nighter," Tank laughed, the sound harsh. "You tear down a Harley?" He looked at Cobra, grinning. "Come on, man. Let's find a real shop." The woman's eyes flicked to Tank, cool and unbothered. "There's no other shop for 60 miles? You want to tow it that far in this heat? Be my guest." Cobra studied her, his jaw working. Pride and practicality warred in his chest. The Brotherhood did not put faith easily in strangers, and a woman mechanic was something none of them had encountered before. Yet desperation had a way of bending rules. "How much?" he asked. She shrugged. "Depends on what's broken." "Could be 500. "Could be 2,000, Reaper scoffed. $2,000? For what?" "We could buy another bike for that. Then buy another bike," she said simply, turning back to the Sportster she had been working on. "I've got other jobs." Cobra raised a hand, silencing the murmurs behind him. He stepped closer, his voice low, dangerous. "You think you can fix it, really?" She met his gaze without hesitation. "I know I can. Question is, do you trust me to?" The air tightened. The angels watched, waiting for Cobra's call. He had built that bike with his own hands, poured years into it. Handing it over to anyone was hard. Handing it to her felt like a gamble, but the rally waited. The Brotherhood needed him whole. "Fix it," he said at last. "But if you mess it up, we'll have words." She nodded once, no fear in her eyes. "Fair enough." The angels filed out, some lingering by the door, watching as she began pulling tools from the bench. Cobra stayed longest, his eyes tracking her every move. She ignored him, already focused, hands moving with precision, as she began disassembling the engine. Outside, the pack gathered in the shade of the building, leaning against their bikes, passing around water bottles and cigarettes. The heat pressed down, relentless, but none of them left. This was their brother's bike, and they would wait. Tank shook his head, grinning. "A woman. Cobra's letting a woman work on his bike. Never thought I'd see it." "Desperation makes fools of us all," Reaper muttered, lighting a smoke. But one of the older members, a man called Wrench, watched the bay with narrowed eyes. She knew what she was looking at, saw it in how she touched it. "That's not amateur work, or she's bluffing," Tank countered. "Plenty of people talk big until the wrench slips." Inside, the woman worked in silence. The engine came apart piece by piece, cylinders lifted, pistons examined. Her hands moved with the certainty of someone who had done this 1,000 times. Grease blackened her fingers, sweat beaded on her forehead, but she did not slow. The radio played on, filling the space with soft static and melody, but she was elsewhere, lost in the rhythm of the work. Hours passed. The sun arced across the sky, shadows lengthening. The angels rotated between the bay and the diner across the street, bringing back food and coffee, but always keeping watch. Cobra sat on a stool just inside the bay, arms crossed, saying nothing, but his presence loomed large. By evening she had the engine stripped bare. Parts lay organized on the bench, each one cleaned, inspected. She held up a piston, turning it in the light, then set it aside with a frown. "Scored cylinder," she said, not looking at him. "Ring failure. Probably overheating. Looks like it's been running hot for a while." Cobra's jaw tightened. He knew she was right. He had pushed the bike hard, long rides in brutal heat, ignored the warning signs because stopping felt like weakness. "Can you fix it?" he asked, his voice rough. She nodded, already reaching for a file. "I'll need to hone the cylinder, replace the rings, check the valves. It'll take time. How much time? All night. Maybe into tomorrow morning. He stood, looming over her, but she did not flinch. You sure you can handle it? She looked up, green eyes steady. I've rebuilt worse. He held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded. Then do it. The angels settled in for the long haul. Some slept on the ground outside, using their jackets as pillows. Others stayed awake, smoking, talking low. Cobra remained in the bay, watching her work, the hours bleeding together in the hum of tools and the hiss of compressed air. She did not speak much, only occasionally asking for him to hold a part or pass a tool. Her focus was absolute, her hands never hesitating. The engine began to come back together piece by piece, each bolt tightened with care, each seal checked twice. Midnight came and went. The desert cooled, stars spreading thick and bright across the sky. Inside the bay, the single overhead light buzzed, casting harsh shadows. She worked on, grease streaked across her cheek, exhaustion lining her face, but her hands remained steady. Cobra watched, and slowly, something shifted in him. He saw the way she handled the tools, the respect she gave the machine, the refusal to cut corners. This was not someone playing at being a mechanic. This was someone who lived it. Where'd you learn this? He asked, his voice breaking the long silence. She glanced up, surprised he had spoken. My dad, he owned this place. Taught me everything. Where is he now? Her hands paused just for a moment. Dead 3 years ago. Heart attack. Cobra nodded slowly. So you kept it running? Someone had to. She returned to the engine, tightening a bolt with practiced precision. He loved bikes, loved fixing them more than riding them. Said there was honesty in engines. They don't lie. They break or they run. Smart man, Cobra said quietly. She smiled, small and sad. He was. Dawn broke pale and cold across the desert. The sun climbed slow, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. Inside the bay, she tightened the last bolt, wiped down the engine casing and stepped back. Her eyes were red-rimmed with exhaustion, her body swaying slightly, but her expression held satisfaction. Done, she said, her voice hoarse. Cobra stood, his own exhaustion forgotten. He stepped forward, eyes scanning every inch of the engine. It gleamed clean and perfect, every part in place. He reached out, running his fingers along the metal, feeling the warmth of new work. Start it, he said. She nodded, moving to the ignition. Her hand hesitated for just a moment, then turned the key. The engine roared to life. The sound was perfect, smooth and strong. No hesitation, no stutter. It rumbled deep, vibrating through the concrete, through their bones. Cobra's face split into a grin, rare and genuine. Outside, the angels stirred, heads lifting, eyes widening. They rushed into the bay, surrounding the bike, disbelief and awe mixing in their expressions. Holy, Tank breathed, staring at the engine. She killed it, stepping back, wiping her hands on the rag. It'll run. Just don't push it so hard next time. Cobra turned to her, his grin fading into something more serious. He reached into his vest, pulling out a wad of bills. How much? She named a price, fair but firm. He counted it out, then paused. His eyes flicked to the others, then back to her. A thought formed, reckless and bold. You're good, he said slowly. Real good. Maybe the best I've seen, she shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. I do my job. Better than that. He glanced at Tank, who was still staring at the bike like it was a miracle. Then back to her. I'll make you a bet, her eyebrows lifted. A bet? Yeah, $1 million. The bay went silent. Every angel froze, eyes snapping to Cobra. Even she stilled, rag falling slack in her hands. What kind of bet? She asked carefully. Cobra crossed his arms, his grin returning sharper now. We've got a bike. A 1952 Panhead. Been sitting in a member's garage for 20 years. No one's been able to get it running. Shops have tried, mechanics have tried, all failed. You get it running, really running, not just a sputter but solid, and I'll give you $1 million. Tank stepped forward, eyes wide. Cobra, you serious? Dead serious. He did not look away from her. But if you can't do it, you work for us. Free. Any bike, any time for a year. The stakes hung in the air, heavy and sharp. $1 million. A year of labor. The angels murmured, some grinning, others frowning, but none argued. Cobra's word was law. She stood there, grease-stained and exhausted, staring at the man who had just offered her a fortune or a chain. Her mind raced. $1 million could save the shop, pay off debts, secure her future. But if she failed, a year of her life belonged to them. She looked down at her hands, scarred and strong, then back up at Cobra. In his eyes, she saw challenge, but also respect. He believed she might actually do it. "Where's the bike?" she asked. Cobra's grin widened. 2 hours north. "We'll take you there tomorrow." She nodded slowly, her heart pounding. "Then you've got a bet." The angels erupted in shouts, some laughing, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Tank clapped Cobra on the shoulder, grinning wide. "You're insane, brother." "Maybe," Cobra said, his eyes still on her. "Or maybe I just found the one person who can do it." She stood alone in the center of the bay, the weight of the bet settling over her like a mantle. Outside, the sun climbed higher, burning away the cool of dawn. The desert stretched endless, unforgiving. But she had been forged in places like this, shaped by heat and hardship. She looked at the Harley, still ticking as it cooled, and allowed herself a small smile. Tomorrow, the real test would begin. The angels mounted their bikes, engines roaring back to life. Cobra swung onto his Harley, the sound pure and strong, and gave her a nod. "Tomorrow morning, be ready." Then they were gone, a thunder of chrome and leather disappearing down the highway, leaving only dust and the echo of engines. She stood in the empty bay, the silence pressing in. Her body ached, her hands trembled with exhaustion, but her mind was sharp, already turning over the challenge ahead. A 1952 panhead, 20 years dead. No one had brought it back, but she would. She had to. The shop settled into stillness around her. The radio played on, the same old songs. She walked to the workbench, picking up a wrench, feeling its weight. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "Engines don't lie. They break or they run. Your job is to make them run." She set the wrench down, her resolve hardening into steel. Tomorrow she would face the dead panhead. Tomorrow she would prove what she had always known. She was not just good. She was the best, and $1 million was just the beginning. The next morning arrived with the rumble of engines. She stood outside her shop, tools packed in a weathered canvas bag, her hair pulled back tight, eyes sharp despite the sleepless night. The convoy rolled in, dust trailing behind them like a banner. Cobra led, his freshly rebuilt Harley purring smooth and strong. He pulled up beside her, killing the engine. "Ready?" She nodded, slinging her bag over her shoulder. "Let's see this panhead." The ride north stretched through desert that gave way to scrubland, then rocky hills. She rode behind Tank on his bike, holding tight as the wind tore at her clothes, the highway blurring beneath them. 2 hours felt like minutes, adrenaline sharpening every sense. They turned off onto a dirt road that climbed into the hills, ending at a compound. A main house, weathered but solid, surrounded by outbuildings and garages. Bikes lined the property, some gleaming, others in pieces. This was hallowed ground for the Brotherhood, a place where chrome and loyalty were forged together. Cobra led her to the largest garage, its doors rusted but sturdy. Inside, darkness swallowed the space until someone hit the lights. Fluorescent bulbs flickered to life, revealing the panhead. It sat in the center, draped in dust and cobwebs, a ghost of former glory. The 1952 Harley-Davidson panhead, its teardrop tank dulled, chrome pitted with age, tires flat and cracked. But beneath the decay, she saw the bones of something magnificent. The engine, though seized and silent, held the promise of resurrection. She walked around it slowly, hands trailing over the frame, eyes cataloguing every detail. The angels gathered, watching in silence, the weight of expectation pressing down. 20 years, Wrench said quietly. 3 shops gave up, said it was too far gone. She knelt beside the engine, peering into the cylinders. Rust, corrosion, seized pistons. The carburetor was clogged, the electrical system a mess of frayed wires. The fuel tank would need cleaning, possibly replacing. Every system compromised by time and neglect. She stood, meeting Cobra's gaze. It's bad, but it's not dead. "Can you do it?" he asked, his voice level but his eyes intense. "Give me 3 days." Cobra glanced at the others, then nodded. "You've got 2, she did not argue, 2 days. 48 hours to bring back what had been abandoned. The challenge settled into her bones, familiar and fierce. They cleared a workspace for her, brought tools, parts scavenged from other bikes. She stripped down to a tank top, tying back her hair, and began. The panhead came apart under her hands. Piece by piece, each component examined, cleaned, or set aside for replacement. The angels rotated through, watching, offering parts, occasionally asking questions. She answered when she could, but mostly she worked in focused silence, her world narrowing to metal and motion. Tank brought her food she barely touched. Wrench stayed late into the night, handing her tools without being asked, learning her rhythm. Even Cobra returned each evening, sitting on a stool in the corner, saying nothing, but his presence a constant weight. The first day bled into night. She honed cylinders by hand, the screech of metal on metal filling the garage. Her arms burned, sweat stinging her eyes, but she did not stop. The pistons came free, corroded rings replaced with new. The carburetor disassembled, soaked, rebuilt. Every wire stripped and reconnected. The electrical system rising from chaos into order. The second day dawned hot and unforgiving. She had not slept, only dozed in brief moments, waking to continue. Her hands shook with exhaustion, but they remained steady when it mattered. The engine began to take shape, clean and whole, gaskets sealed, timing set. By afternoon, the panhead stood complete. Every bolt tightened, every system checked twice. She filled it with fresh oil, new fuel, primed the carburetor. The angels gathered, a silent wall of leather and ink, their faces unreadable. She stood back, wiping her hands, her body swaying. This was it, the moment that would decide everything. Cobra stepped forward, his eyes moving from her to the bike. "Start it!" She moved to the panhead, her hand trembling as it reached for the kickstart. She said a silent prayer to her father, to every engine she had ever brought back from the edge, and kicked down hard. The engine turned, once, twice, then caught. The sound roared through the garage, a thunderous, perfect rumble that shook the walls. The panhead lived, its engine singing after 20 years of silence, chrome gleaming under the lights, every cylinder firing true. The angels erupted. Shouts, laughter, disbelief turning to awe. Tank grabbed Wrench, both men grinning like children. Reaper shook his head, laughing at the impossibility made real. Cobra stood frozen, staring at the panhead as it idled, strong and steady. Then he looked at her, and his face split into the widest grin she had ever seen. He walked forward, pulling her into a crushing hug that lifted her off the ground. She gasped, shocked, then laughed, exhaustion and triumph pouring out together. "You did it," he said, setting her down, his eyes bright. "You actually did it." She nodded, unable to speak, tears cutting through the grease on her face. Cobra reached into his vest, pulling out a folded envelope. He held it out to her, heavy with promise. $1 million. As promised, she took it with trembling hands, the weight of it more than money. It was validation, proof, a future rebuilt from rust and refusal to quit. The Brotherhood surrounded her, hands clapping her shoulders, voices raised in respect. She had earned something rarer than wealth. She had earned their honor. That night they celebrated. Bikes lined up under the stars, engines roaring in chorus, a symphony of chrome and fire. She sat among them, no longer an outsider, but one of their own. Cobra raised a bottle in her direction, and the others followed. "To the best mechanic we've ever met," he declared, his voice carrying across the night. They roared their agreement, and she smiled, exhausted and whole. The next morning, she rode back to her shop, the envelope tucked safely away. The memory of engines singing in her ears. The desert stretched endless before her, but she no longer rode it alone. She had proven what her father always knew. Engines don't lie. They break or they run, and she made them run better than anyone alive. The sign above her shop would stay faded, the building worn, but inside, her legend had just begun. And when the Hell's Angels rode through, they stopped, not with doubt, but with respect, knowing that behind those bay doors worked hands that could resurrect the dead and turn iron into fire.